I love my sewing machine. I love sewing on it. I love doing all kinds of things on it. But there are those moments, those times where you have to do some other kind of stitching. And that's where hand stitching comes in to be very helpful. I'm Barb Owen of Barb Owen Designs, and today's class is all about hand stitches. So let's get started. These are some of the stitches I'm going to show you how to do, just a few of them. I have even a few more that I'm going to show you here in a little bit. But to get started, we're going to take out my pin here. We're going to do a running stitch, we're going to do a basting stitch, and some different versions of basting stitches, and I'm going to show you how to do the back stitch. And that's all on this one little sample right here. So that's where we're going to start. And then I'm going to take it from there and show you some other things to do. And I'm going to show you some creative ways to use these stitches. So here is my little sample of fabric. And this happens to be a double layer of fabric. If I can get it apart to show you. There we go, double layer of fabric. And the reason we want to use a double layer of fabric is because most of these stitches I'm going to show you today are construction stitches, which means they're meant to hold things together as opposed to being just exclusively decorative. Now, I'm going to show you some decorative things, ways to use these stitches in a decorative way as well, but primarily they were intended to be construction stitches to hold things together. All right, so I have my needle, which is just a basic sewing needle. It's a sharp sewing needle. It has an eye big enough to accommodate the thread, but it's not a great big eye that's going to poke a great big, leave a big trail behind it. And I'm going to use black beading thread just for the purposes of demonstration. Now, if you were actually hemming things or if you were sewing things, you might use different threads for different applications. For something like this, in a basting or running stitch or construction stitch, you'd want to use a construction thread. I'm using beading thread because it shows up quite well and it's nice and strong, but it's kind of a thin thread. To get started, thread your needle. And then I'm going to do a knot. This is the beginning knot that I use all the time for everything. So I take the end of the thread. So my thread is running through my needle, just like that. So I'm taking the end of the thread and I'm overlapping the needle with the end of the thread, just like this. Hold it with my left hand. And by the way, this is all geared for someone who's right-handed. So if you're left-handed, you're just going to need, I'm sure you're familiar with reversing things, but that's what you'll need to do is reverse the directions as we go through. Grasp the end of the thread and the point of the needle. They're overlapping each other, and then simply wind the thread several times. And then hold those winds in your left hand and then pull the point of the needle, still holding the winds of the thread. Not too tight. You just want to hold it tight enough that it will allow that thread to slip through. And then you end up with this great little knot. It's a small knot and it doesn't make a big loopy mess. And I use that all the time when I'm stitching. So the first stitch we're going to talk about is the running stitch.